When the Kia Telluride debuted in 2019, it reset expectations for mid-size three-row SUVs. It won pretty much every award out there and it maintained class-leading stats for many years afterwards. Now for 2027, we have a fully redesigned, all-new Telluride. And the question is, can the sequel be as good as the original? Before we get into answering that, do us a favor, hit like and subscribe below to get all of our latest reviews. This new Telluride is about 2 inches longer nose to tail, but otherwise it's about the same size as before. It's also a couple 100 pounds heavier depending on which trim level you go with. Now up front we have this really bold grille. It takes up the entire width and I'm not sure how I feel about it just yet. To me it's just a little heavy-handed, but I'm not the arbiter of taste and style, so let us know in the comments what you think of the front end of this new Telluride. The entire front end actually is a little more trucky. It's more upright. It's not quite as rounded and futuristic looking. So if that's your aesthetic, you'll probably like it. There's also the X Pro line, which is their off-road version, which has a different grille that's more blacked out. You don't have these body-colored streaks in there. And it's about as imposing and bold as the other one. But sometimes bold is also somewhat polarizing. So it's hard to say if it's going to grow on me, but so far, I don't hate it. One of the more distinguishing traits of the front end are these amber marker lights. They had amber lights before, and these are just a different take. They're a little more angular, a little more faceted, and I think they kind of work with the rest of the grille. There's also a lot going on stylistically on the side of the Telluride, starting with these angular fenders. They're distinctive. There's really nothing else out there that does that. But I'm not completely sold on these tabs here. I feel like they're just a little over-designed, maybe superfluous and not that necessary. I feel like it'd be a little bit cleaner without them. But what do you think? Do you like them or are you in my camp? Let me know in the comments below. There's also these flush-mounted door handles, which are sort of a carryover from their EV6 and EV9 cars. And we also have echoes of the faceting and mirrors here. Another thing that sort of throws me every now and then are the black accents that just sort of outline things. I'm wondering how they would look if they were body colored. But oddly enough, the Telluride is really sensitive to colors and trim levels. They can look fairly different and take on new personalities. Now, I wasn't a big fan of those faceted fenders on the desert tan looking one, but I really started liking them on the silver and especially on the darker colors. I saw a blacked out Telluride and I thought it looked really sharp. But unfortunately, that's not the best compliment for designers, but it did have a lot of presence. And speaking of different personalities for colors and trim levels, the X Pro line, which is their off-road version, kind of takes on an entirely different feel altogether. It has much smaller 18-inch wheels and all-terrain tires, has 9.1 inches of ground clearance, and recovery hooks that are actually functional. Overall, it gives it a more appropriate look for its off-road capabilities. Around the back, the Telluride kind of takes on an entirely different personality. I see a lot of Range Rover back here with this soap bar shaped tail and these upright tail lights, but I'm sure the designers were working on this long before the Range Rover debuted. The base engine for the Telluride is a 2.5-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder that's good for 274 horsepower and 311 pound-feet of torque. And that's less horsepower, but more torque than the previous V6, so I'll call it a wash. It's mated to an 8-speed automatic transmission. The base LX trim is front-wheel drive only, while all-wheel drive is included in the mid-range trims and higher. For everything else, all-wheel drive is a $2,000 option. This happens to be the hybrid, which is good for 329 horsepower and 339 pound-feet of torque. It's mated to a 6-speed automatic transmission, but this engine is not available on the X Pro off-road models. The base engine can tow up to 5,000 pounds, while the hybrid maxes out at 4,500. So how does this all come together on the road? Let's find out. I'll admit, when I heard that the Telluride was going with a turbocharged 4-cylinder instead of the old V6, I was a little bit hesitant. But I'm happy to report that, at least with this hybrid, it's got plenty of power, it's really buttery smooth, and for most of the time, you really don't even hear the engine. And there's definitely no trace of that transition between the gas engine and electricity. I also drove the base engine Turbo 4 off-road, and I'm happy to report there that it had plenty of power for that, and it's a pretty decent off-roader for moderate terrain. You're not going to be rock crawling with it, but it's pretty good for that kind of terrain without having to step up to something like a 4Runner or a Bronco. Now back to this hybrid, it's quiet, it's smooth, the ride quality is really good. Although with the larger wheels, I can feel a little more of the impacts of some of the bumps and ruts in the road. It is, again, really nice and silent, and we're on some fairly coarse asphalt here. In other vehicles I've driven on this road, it's much, much louder. On the highway, all of the advanced safety features work really well, especially the highway driving assist. It keeps it dead center in the lane and maintains a consistent gap to the car in front. One issue I did have though is the driver attention monitor started freaking out on me. It kept thinking I wasn't looking at the road ahead while I was. That was a little annoying, but that was easy to turn off in the settings. As far as visibility goes, it's really quite good. Despite this big broad hood in front of me, I have a nice view ahead. This roof pillar doesn't get in the way, but the back view, well, it's about what you'd expect from any three-row SUV. It's not the greatest, but you still get a view of what's following you further back. But the off-road versions have a ton of cameras, including an invisible hood look where you can see underneath the vehicle. Maneuverability-wise, it's also pretty decent. I was able to park this in my tiny little carport with minimal fuss. For handling on this tight, twisty road, it's confident, but like any three-row SUV, it's not particularly sporty. Comfort is the name of the game, and the Telluride does it really, really well. Overall, there's not a whole lot to say about how the Telluride drives, and that's actually a good thing. It doesn't pretend to be sporty, and it doesn't need to be. More importantly is what's on the inside, especially in the second and third rows, so let's pull over and go over that. The interior design of the Telluride is somewhat different from the exterior. It's cleaner, it's more simple, it's elemental in so many different ways. Standard features for all Tellurides include this large 12.3-inch infotainment touchscreen, and when you step up to the SX trim or higher, you also get a 12.3-inch instrument panel. Supporting trims get a 4.2-inch instrument panel. You also get this 5-inch central touchscreen for the tri-zone automatic climate control. Also included is a native navigation system, wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, as well as these dual wireless chargers. And I really do like these wireless chargers. They're grippy, they hold the phone really well, and you don't have to be too careful about how you place it there in order to start charging. Also on the SX trim and above, you get a 14-speaker Meridian premium audio system, and it sounds really good. The bass is super punchy, almost a little too punchy where I had to turn it down just a little bit. But if you like thumping, you'll probably like this system. Also included on those trims and higher is ambient interior lighting as well as a surround view monitor. In supporting trims, you get the synthetic leather with cloth upholstery. In the mid-range trims, you just get the synthetic leather. And in the top trims, you get the synthetic leather with synthetic suede. This actually has the optional executive-ish package, which has this white interior. And I think it kind of brightens things up really well. But I do have one minor-ish complaint. It's this panel here with these buttons. It's really hard to see during the day because the lettering is almost the same color as the background, but if you go with a black interior, you won't have that problem. Another issue I have with these buttons is the placement, and they're a little too sensitive. When you're touching the touchscreen, it's really easy to accidentally brush one of those buttons and trigger something unintentionally. On the EX trim and above, you also get ventilated seats. In the top trims, you also get a massage function, which is really nice. It's not the deep kneading that you get, but it sort of just shifts your weight left to right, top to bottom, to kind of relieve some of the hard points while you're driving. And there are a few hard points. The seat cushion is fairly firm and a little flat for my taste. Within the Telluride lineup, you have a few choices for interior materials. In this Telluride, we have what they call engineered wood, which is sort of a laminated but cross-cut grain. It's different. It is something I originally saw on the first generation Tesla Model S, and I really like it. But I like it more in a brown tone rather than this gray tone here. The synthetic leather isn't all that convincing as leather, but it does feel good, and it is soft, and it feels like it's going to hold up well to wear over the years. This trim also gets a head-up display and a digital rearview mirror. When it comes to interior storage, it does pretty well. This center bin right here is really large. It also has some slightly over-engineered cup holders. Here we have this center armrest bin, which is fairly shallow, but there is a very large tray under the center console. And when you combine that with these moderately sized door pockets, you should have enough space for all your personal effects. When it comes to the infotainment system, it is very attractive and the graphics are really nice and sharp. The layouts are fairly easy to figure out, the menus are logical, but it does take a little bit of time for it to register your inputs. One side benefit to all of Kia's brand partnerships are these themes that you can select from National Geographic to Star Wars or your favorite NBA team. Sadly, no Mandalorian yet. As you can see, we have captain's chairs in the second row, but if you wanted a bench seat, you can only get that on the LX and EX trims. Now I have plenty of space back here, tons of legroom and headroom, and I'm 5'10", so about average-ish in size. And I'm not even fully slid up or back. This also has the executive package, so with a touch of the button, it leans way back and kind of scoots down for almost like a business class experience. It also has that for the front seat, which seems a little out of place to me. That's something I usually see in an EV, but I suppose if you're not that involved with your kids' baseball or soccer practice, it'd be a nice place to catch a few Z's. Since this is the Prestige model, we also get heated and ventilated second row seats. One thing I'm always happy to see with three-row SUVs is sunshades. And you get these on the EX trim and higher. Up at the top we have the climate controls, but that seems a little oddly placed to me, especially if you have smaller kids that might not be able to reach that. Down below we have two large cup holders and this handy bin here that slides out with a tray and the bin underneath. Now accessing the third row is easier to go through the center pass-through if you have the captain's chairs and the executive package. And that's because these executive seats take a while to move and slide forward. Without that package, they're manual folding and sliding, and they're much, much quicker. Up top, we also have these dual pane sunroofs, which you get on the SX trim and higher. You get a single sunroof with others, and the base LX, you get none. Here on the side of the seats, you have USB-C charge ports, so you can keep all your devices juiced up. Here in the third row, I have adequate room. Again, you're usually putting smaller passengers back here and not an adult, but I do have a good amount of legroom here, and the seat here is kind of a little further back than middle, so there is a possibility for even more legroom if needed. My headroom, well, I have a little bit of clearance here in this coved out section in the headliner. I am sitting really elevated though. I can see clear over the heads of everyone else. Materials quality back here, as you'd expect, are a lot cheaper than the second and first row. You have hard plastics here because we're technically in the cargo area. But in this top trim, we do have heated rear seats, USB-C charge port, and our own cup holders. I am lacking a little bit of thigh support here. Well, actually, I'm lacking a lot of thigh support here. My knees are pretty far up in the air, but that's not all that uncommon for three-row SUVs. Behind the third row of seats, we have 22.3 cubic feet of cargo space, which is about 1.3 cubic feet bigger than the first generation. It's also slightly larger than most rivals. Underneath, we have a shallow bin for some emergency supplies, as well as a really tiny bin over here. A hands-free power liftgate is standard on all models except for the base LX. And when you want to fold down the second row, it's fairly easy. You just give it a tug here and push it forward. But this floor covering here is a little wonky. When you pull it back up, it tends to fold awkwardly, sometimes up and sometimes it bunches up. So I feel like that could use a little improvement. You do have some nice hooks here on the inside for your shopping bags. And with the seat backs folded, that opens it up to 48.7 cubic feet, which is 2.7 cubic feet larger than the previous generation. And that's about average for the class. With the executive package, we have these power folding second row, and that opens it up to 89.3 cubic feet. Now the hybrid models, they lose about 1 cubic feet overall, but as you can see, it should still be plenty for all your needs. Telluride pricing starts right around $41,000 for the base LX front-wheel drive trim. At the top of the lineup is the X-Pro SX Prestige for just over $58,000. This SX Prestige model, however, with all the options, is just over $60,000. But as I said, a lot of them aren't really that necessary. For fuel economy, the base engine gets 22 mpg for combined city and highway miles for the front-wheel drive model. All-wheel drive gets 20 mpg, but the X-Pro Prestige with its off-road stuff drops to just 19 mpg. This hybrid, however, is rated as high as 35 mpg for the front-wheel drive and 31 mpg for the all-wheel drive. Considering that the hybrid only costs $2,700 more than the base engine, it really makes a lot of sense to go that route, unless you need that off-road stuff. Now, considering if gas was $4 a gallon, you could break even in about 2.5 years. And that's fairly quick to recoup the cost for a hybrid. And these estimates are about average for the respective classes. The Toyota Grand Highlander is the mileage leader, but only by a few mpg. And to answer that question that I posed at the top, I'd say yes. This is a better sequel to the original. But what do you think? Do you like the new Telluride, or would you go for one of its competitors? Maybe the Hyundai Palisade, or Toyota Grand Highlander, or Honda Pilot? Let us know in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons below, and we'll see you in the next review.